I need to read the skill file first, but actually this is a writing task, not a file creation task. So let me just write directly. Let me check the names to avoid. Dorothy, Claire, Helen, Robert, Vivian, Lily, Marcus, Thomas, Nora, Gerald, Patricia, June Calloway, Sandra, Martin, Edna, Evelyn, Caleb, Brianna, Francis. New characters: Loretta, narrator 63, retired nurse; son Owen, fiancée Celeste; neighbor Harriet, fiancée's ex-husband Dean; child Maisie. I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened. I am not the kind of woman who makes scenes. I raised my son on my own for 11 years after his father passed, and in all that time I never once fell apart in public. Not at the funeral. Not when the bank called about the mortgage. Not even the morning I sat in the hospital parking lot after my own biopsy results and just breathed in and out for 20 minutes before driving myself home. I am the kind of woman who holds it together. Always have been. So when I tell you that I almost stood up in the middle of my son's engagement party and screamed, I need you to know what that means. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Owen called me on a Tuesday in March to say he was bringing someone home for dinner. He said it casually, the way he used to ask me to pick up orange juice on my way home from my shift. And I remember I was folding laundry when he said it, and I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. He had dated before, of course. He was 36 years old, but in the last 3 years, since he moved back to Dayton to take the engineering position, he hadn't mentioned anyone, not seriously. So when he said, "Mom, I want you to meet Celeste," there was something in his voice I hadn't heard in a long time. A steadiness. Like he had already decided something. She came to dinner that Friday. She was lovely. That's the honest truth, and I won't pretend otherwise. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a laugh that filled up the kitchen. She brought a bottle of wine she had clearly researched. It was from a vineyard in Virginia that she knew I'd visited with my late husband, Arthur. Owen must have told her. She was thoughtful that way, or seemed to be. We sat at the table for 3 hours. She asked about my nursing career, about Owen's childhood, about Arthur. She listened the way people rarely listen anymore. Not waiting for her turn to talk, but actually absorbing. I liked her. I went to bed that night feeling, for the first time in years, like the future held something warm in it. That was October. By February, Owen called to tell me he had proposed. Celeste had said yes. They were planning an engagement party for late April at her aunt's house in Columbus, and then a wedding in September. I said all the right things. I meant most of them. But there was something. There had always been something, small and quiet, sitting in the back of my mind like a stone in a shoe. I couldn't name it. I told myself I was being the cliché. The widowed mother who can't let go of her son, who sees threats where there are none. I had read enough to know that pattern existed. I refused to be it. So I pushed the feeling down, and I bought a dress for the engagement party, and I drove myself to Columbus on the last Saturday in April. Harriet lived 3 doors down from me on Clover Mill Road and had for 22 years. She was 71, recently widowed herself, and she had known Owen since he was 14 years old. She asked if she could ride with me to Columbus, said she had always loved a party. I said of course. I was glad for the company. We left early. We were maybe 40 minutes outside of Dayton when Harriet said, very quietly, "Loretta, there's something I've been trying to decide whether to tell you." I kept my eyes on the road. "Tell me," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, about 3 weeks ago, I was visiting my daughter in Westerville. You know she lives just off Schrock Road, near that little strip of shops. I stopped at the coffee place on the corner to wait for her. She was running late, and I looked up from my phone and I saw Celeste. I said nothing. I waited. She was at a table near the window, Harriet said, with a man and a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old. The little girl called him Daddy. She called Celeste Mommy. The road ahead of me felt very long suddenly. "Harriet, I know. Are you sure it was her? I've had dinner at your house twice since October, Loretta. I know her face." I drove for a while without speaking. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my thoughts were not steady at all. "Did they see you?" I asked. No, I don't think so. I left before she could. Did they seem? I stopped. I didn't know how to finish the question. They seemed like a family, Harriet said simply. That's the only way I know how to put it. We arrived in Columbus an hour later. The aunt's house was a beautiful old Victorian on a tree-lined street, already full of people when we pulled up. Flowers everywhere. String lights strung between the oak trees in the backyard. A bar set up near the fence. Music drifting out through the open French doors. I saw Owen standing near the back gate, laughing at something someone had said, and he looked so happy that my chest hurt. Harriet put her hand on my arm before we got out of the car. I didn't tell you this to ruin tonight, she said. I told you because I thought you needed to know before it went any further. Whatever it means, whatever explanation there might be, you deserve to know. I know, I said. Thank you. What do you want to do? I sat there for a moment looking at the house, at the lights, at my son laughing near the gate. I want to watch, I said. That's all. I just want to watch. We went inside. The party was everything it was supposed to be. Celeste moved through the rooms like she had been doing this her whole life, greeting people, refilling glasses, touching Owen's arm whenever she passed him. She hugged me warmly when she saw me and said, I'm so glad you're here. And I hugged her back and smiled and said, wouldn't miss it. I was watching her eyes when I said it. She smiled back without hesitation. I excused myself after a while and walked through the house on my way to the bathroom. I wasn't looking for anything, or maybe I was. Maybe something in me already knew that the answer was somewhere in that house, and my feet were following it before my brain caught up. The hallway off the kitchen was quiet. There were framed photos on the wall. Celeste's aunt's family, mostly, going back decades. But near the end of the hall, half hidden behind a coat rack, there was a corkboard covered in snapshots. Party photos, it looked like. I almost walked past it. I stopped. In the lower left corner, slightly crooked, was a photograph I recognized the edges of before I understood what I was seeing. Celeste. Younger by maybe 3 or 4 years, hair a little longer, but unmistakably her. She was standing beside a man. Tall, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, and they were cutting a cake together. A wedding cake. She was in a white dress. I looked at the man in the photo for a long time. It was not Owen. I took the photo carefully off the board. I turned it over. On the back, in someone's handwriting, Celeste and Dean, September 2021. The engagement party was April 2026. She had been married 4.5 years ago, and somewhere in Westerville, a man named Dean was raising a little girl who called Celeste Mommy, and Celeste was in this house right now, accepting congratulations on her upcoming marriage to my son. I put the photo in my purse. I walked back to the party. My face did not change. I have spent 30 years as a nurse. I have delivered bad news to families in waiting rooms at 2 a.m. and kept my voice even and my expression clear because that was what the situation required. I called on every year of that training, and I smiled, and I accepted a glass of wine, and I stood next to Owen while people toasted to his happiness. Inside, I was running through everything very quickly. Maybe she was divorced. People divorce. That wasn't a crime, but if she was simply divorced, why had she never mentioned it? Owen had told me early on that Celeste had said she'd never been in a serious relationship before him. Those were his words. He'd said it like it was something they had in common. His long stretch of being alone, her same, and the child, a little girl who called her Mommy. There was a story here that I had not been told. I found Harriet near the bar and tilted my head toward the back garden. She followed without a word. We stood near the far fence, away from the lights and the music. I showed her the photograph. She looked at it for a long time. That's the man from the coffee shop, she said. That's him. I nodded. Loretta, what are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said. I need more than a photograph. You could ask her. and she'll deny it or explain it away, and I'll have shown my hand before I know what's actually true. I shook my head. I need to know what's true first. Harriet looked at me the way she has looked at me for 22 years. Like she already knows I'm going to do whatever I've decided to do, and she's just waiting to see what shape it takes. All right, she said. So what's the first step? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the guest room in the aunt's house. They had offered, and it seemed easier than the drive home. And I stared at the ceiling and thought. By morning, I had a name, Dean, and a city, Westerville, and a rough time frame, September 2021. I also had my phone. I am 63 years old, and I am not particularly proud of how quickly I learned to navigate county court records online. But there I was, in the early gray light, in a borrowed nightgown, searching Ohio public records for a marriage and divorce record involving a woman named Celeste. I found the marriage license in under 20 minutes. Celeste Ann Whitmore and Dean Patrick Rourke, married September 18, 2021, Franklin County, Ohio. I searched for a divorce filing. There wasn't one. I sat with that for a long time. I searched divorce filing. There wasn't one. I sat with that for a long time. I searched again from 3 different angles. I searched his name. I searched her name. I searched the county court database by case number range. I am a methodical woman. It is what made me a good nurse, and I am not given to jumping to conclusions. There was no divorce filing in Franklin County, or Delaware County, or any of the surrounding counties. Celeste Ann Whitmore was, as far as the public record was concerned, still married to Dean Patrick Rourke, and she was engaged to my son. Owen called me at 9 that morning, chipper and sleepy at the same time, to ask if I wanted to grab breakfast before I drove home. I said yes. I sat across from him at a little diner around the corner, and I watched him put 4 sugars in his coffee, the way he has since he was a teenager, and I thought, how do I do this? Not whether, how. Because I had already decided. There was never any question about that. Whatever it cost me, his anger, his disbelief, the possibility that he would choose her over me and I would have to watch from a distance, I was going to tell him what I knew. The question was only about the right moment and the right way, and I knew, sitting there watching him stir his too sweet coffee, that the moment was not right now, not with her still in the city, not before I had talked to Dean Rourke. I drove home and I called a private investigator. I will not pretend that was easy. It cost money I had been saving for other things, and it felt like a step into a world I didn't recognize. But the man I found, a quiet, thorough person named Al, who came recommended by a friend of a colleague, called me back within 4 days. What he told me was this. Dean Rourke had filed for divorce in the summer of 2023. Celeste had contested it. The proceedings had dragged through mediation and court dates and come to a halt when Celeste stopped responding to her own attorney. The case had been effectively suspended, pending her re-engagement with the process. As of the date of our conversation, the divorce was not finalized. They were technically still married. The child, a daughter, age 4, named Maisie, was the subject of a pending custody arrangement that also could not move forward while the divorce remained stalled. Dean Rourke had been trying to legally end the marriage and gain formal custody of his daughter for almost 2 years. His ex, his wife, had vanished from the process, changed cities, and was now, apparently, engaged to someone else. Al sent me a copy of the custody filing. I read every page. I called Harriet when I was done. She didn't just hide a marriage, I said. She abandoned her own daughter. Legally, Dean is raising Maisie alone, and he can't even get full custody because Celeste won't finalize the divorce. Harriet was quiet for a long moment. Owen needs to know, she said. I know. Before the wedding. I know, Loretta. He needs to know now. She was right. Of course she was right. I had been turning over the how and the when for 2 weeks, and the answer had always been the same, soon and carefully, and with proof in my hands. I drove to Dayton on a Wednesday evening. Owen was home. His car was in the driveway. I had not called ahead. I know my son. If I had called ahead, he would have told Celeste, and she would have had time to prepare a story. He opened the door looking surprised and pleased, the way he always does when I show up unexpectedly. Mom, hey, everything okay? Can I come in? I said. I need to talk to you about something. He looked at my face. He stood back and let me in. We sat at his kitchen table. I had the documents in a folder in my bag. The marriage license, the custody filing, the investigator's summary. I set the folder on the table between us, but I didn't open it yet. I looked at my son and I thought about every way this conversation could go. And then I just started talking. I told him about Harriet seeing Celeste in Westerville with Dean and Maisie. I told him about finding the photo at the engagement party. I told him what I had found in the public records and what Al had confirmed. I told him about Maisie. He didn't interrupt. He sat very still. His coffee went cold. When I was done, I opened the folder and pushed it across the table. He read every page. It took a long time. She told me she'd never been serious about anyone, he said finally. His voice was flat in a way that scared me more than anger would have. I know, she has a daughter. Yes, she just left her. Yes, she just left her. He wasn't asking. He was working through it, the way he has worked through hard things since he was small, piece by piece, very quietly, letting himself feel each thing before he moved to the next. What do I do? He said. That's not mine to answer, I said. I can only tell you what's true. What you do with it is yours. He nodded. He called Celeste and asked her to come over. He didn't say why. He said he just needed to see her. She arrived 40 minutes later. She walked in and saw me, and her face did something very complicated in the space of about 1 second, a flicker of something that was gone before it fully appeared. Loretta, she said pleasantly, I didn't know you were here. Sit down, Owen said. She sat. He slid the folder across to her. She looked at it for a long moment before she opened it. When she did, I watched her face. I am very good at watching faces. I have watched people's faces in the hardest moments of their lives, and I know what guilt looks like when it is trying to masquerade as confusion. She tried confusion first. I don't understand what, Celeste. His voice was quiet. Just tell me the truth. The confusion dissolved. What replaced it was something harder to name. Not quite shame, not quite defiance. Something exhausted. Something that had been carried a long time. Dean and I were over, she said, in every way that mattered. The legal part was just, it was stuck, and I didn't know how to unstick it without going back into all of it, and I thought she stopped. I thought I could start over. I thought if I could start over, I thought if I could just get far enough from it. You have a daughter, Owen said. She flinched. I know. You left a 4-year-old? It's not. She's better with Dean. She always was. I was not. I am not. She pressed her lips together. I am not a good mother. The room was very quiet. You lied to me, Owen said. From the beginning, you let me fall in love with a version of you that wasn't real. The part that loves you is real, she said, and her voice broke on it in a way that I think was genuine. That part has always been real. But the rest, she didn't answer. Owen stood up. He stood up slowly, the way a man does when he has made a decision that he knows is going to hurt for a long time. I need you to leave, he said. I need some time, and I need you to leave. She left. She didn't argue. She took her coat and her bag, and she walked out the front door. And the three of us, Owen, me, and the silence, were left in the kitchen. He sat back down. He put his head in his hands. I put my hand on his shoulder, and I kept it there. We sat like that for a while. Eventually, he looked up. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. He looked like a man who has just learned that the map he was using was wrong, and now he has to figure out where he actually is. Did you know? He said. Before the engagement party? Did you have a feeling and not tell me? I thought about it. I had something, I said. Something small that I couldn't name. I told myself I was being the cliché. The mother who can't let go. You weren't. No. He nodded slowly. I'm glad you told me, he said. I know it wasn't easy. I know you knew it, Michael, badly. It went the only way it could, I said. You deserved to know what was true. He made us both tea. We sat there until nearly midnight, talking about things that had nothing to do with Celeste, about Arthur, about the house on Clover Mill Road, about a trip Owen wanted to take to the coast someday. Small things, real things. Before I left, he hugged me at the door the way he used to when he was small. Not a quick goodbye hug, but a real one, both arms, long enough to mean something. I'll be okay, he said. I know you will, I said. You always are. I drove home through the dark. The highway was quiet and the fields on either side were silver under the moon, and I thought about Arthur, the way I always do late at night on long drives. I thought about what he would have said. He would have said, you did right. He would have said it simply, the way he said everything, without fanfare, without needing to elaborate. You did right. I think so too. I found out later, through a mutual connection, that Celeste went back to Franklin County and re-engaged with the divorce proceedings. The case was finalized in the fall. Dean got primary custody of Maisie. I don't know what became of Celeste after that. Owen took the trip to the coast. He sent me photos. Gray water, a little rented cabin, a pelican sitting on a pier post looking deeply unimpressed with everything. He looked rested in the photos. Lighter. He's okay. He was always going to be okay. That's the thing about raising a person well. You don't do it so that nothing bad ever happens to them. You do it so that when something bad happens, they know how to stand back up. That's all any of us can do. And to you, listening to this, if something feels wrong, don't spend 6 months talking yourself out of it the way I almost did. Trust what you know. The quiet feeling in the back of your mind is not always paranoia. Sometimes it is simply your experience speaking in a voice too soft to hear in the noise of ordinary life. Listen for it anyway. I've thought about this a lot since everything settled. Not obsessively. I'm past that now. But in the quiet way you think about things that change the shape of your life a little. What strikes me most isn't the deception itself. People lie. People make choices out of fear or desperation that they later can't find their way out of. I've been a nurse long enough to know that human beings are capable of extraordinary cruelty and extraordinary tenderness, sometimes in the same week, sometimes in the same person. Celeste wasn't a monster. She was someone who had built something false because the truth felt too heavy to carry, and then she kept building on top of it until the whole structure had to fall. What strikes me is the cost. Not to me, not even to Owen, though his cost was real, and I watched him carry it, and it was hard to watch. The cost to Maisie, a 4-year-old girl in Westerville who grew up in the wreckage of choices she had no part in making. That little girl will be okay. Dean seemed like a steady man from everything I could piece together, and children are more resilient than we give them credit for, but still. The consequences of dishonesty don't stay contained to the person who chose it. They spread. They always spread. That's the thing I want to say clearly, because I think it sometimes gets lost in stories like this one, where the focus lands on the betrayal and the confrontation and the resolution. The part that doesn't get talked about enough is what it costs to live a lie over time. Celeste didn't just lie to Owen. She had been lying for years, to Dean, to Maisie in a different way, to herself most of all. And every year she kept the lie. The path back to something honest got a little narrower and a little harder to find. By the time I found that photograph in that hallway, she was so far inside the story she constructed that I don't think she fully remembered where the real one began. I think about Owen sitting at his kitchen table reading those documents. The stillness of him. He didn't rage, didn't break anything, didn't fall apart. He just read and absorbed, and then he stood up and made a decision. I was so proud of him in that moment that I could barely speak, not because he did anything dramatic, because he did. anything dramatic, because he didn't. He simply chose the truth over the comfort of pretending, even though the truth was going to hurt him for a while. That's what I hope he carries forward. Not the wounds heal, but the knowledge that he is someone who can sit with a hard thing and still choose clearly. That doesn't come from nowhere. You build that capacity slowly through small, honest choices made over years, until when the big moment comes, you already know who you are. I'm 63 years old and I'm still building it. That's the part nobody tells you when you're young. That character isn't something you arrive at. It's something you keep making every day out of the choices you make when no one's watching and nothing is forcing your hand. Trust what you know. Do what's hard. Tell the truth even when it costs you something. That's all there is, really. That's the whole of it.